So hi everyone, and welcome to, I'm forgetting I've got a thing down here, I don't need to do that. Welcome to macOS. macOS has a built-in screen reader called VoiceOver, aka shift your mindset on accessibility and inclusion. And I realized this would have been the perfect opportunity to wear one of those fantastic Mac Admins Foundation t-shirts. And I left it really late to order one. There's a whole hilarious, not very hilarious backstory as to why. I went to order one, it was going to take ages, so just imagine I'm wearing one. I'm wearing the yellow, it just looks fabulous. So, hi, I'm Steve Qurike. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a white man in my mid-40s, which to my mind sounds slightly less depressing than saying middle-aged. Although I went camping at the weekend, there was sunshine, I might be slightly less pale than I normally would be from sitting in a basement. So I have short brown hair, I have a scruffy beard that's sort of greying a bit, and I'm wearing these sort of glasses with thick, dark frames. And I'm currently a client platform engineering lead at Thoughtworks. So maybe you've heard an introduction like that before, maybe you haven't, but if you're interested, this is something put aside. This is the self-description for inclusive meetings by vocalize.co.uk. So I guess, not everyone can necessarily see me, so now you have a sense of who's talking to you. Whether I'm worth listening to is something else again. I also feel I need to introduce my employer, Thoughtworks. So, hey, we're Thoughtworks. We're a global IT consultancy. We turn 30 this month. The marketing and brand people are very excited. They've made like nice 30 logos. So we have offices all over the world. I've kind of lost count of where they all are, and home to almost over 10,000 thought workers, which is kind of crazy. And we help our customers build awesome digital products and write the custom software that helps differentiate them from their competitors. It would also be remiss of me not to introduce my virtual co-presenter. You'll see her in a bit. This is Sarah. She's a white woman in her mid-30s with thick, large glasses, long brown state hair. So she's had a customer experience at Thoughtworks. And to be honest, she's the real reason, she twisted my arm and convinced me I wanted to come and do this presentation today. So it started with a ticket, as these things so often do. Or a few tickets. So Thoughtworks is cloud first. We buy SaaS products, and if we do develop internal in-house stuff, it's all running in the cloud. But we were receiving tickets from people who were sort of struggling a bit. They couldn't easily use some of these tools. And Sarah, as head of that customer experience piece, was looking at how do we improve this? How do we make it better? And she talked to the team and who had to fix it, and people were struggling. And it wasn't that people didn't want to make things better, they just were struggling to know where to start. So eventually that led to this. So there are a bunch of user interviews, and Sarah and team created this fantastic internal resource. So Campus is our internal sort of training platform, and it aggregates all sorts of things. It has links to external training things, in-house stuff. And so they curated a fantastic list of resources, so interviews, slide decks, things, stuff, that were shared more widely across the company. And I guess what I'm here to do is to share some of the things I've learned from digging through this fantastic resource. So really, three big shifts. I guess assumptions I've made that were really, really wrong. And we'll go through those today. So we'll start with this idea of accessibility is good for people. And, well, yeah, of course it is. But it's a shift from accessibility is good for people. Yeah, great, of course it is. But it's also really good for your business. Or potentially it is. So, it started with a ticket. And the thing with tickets, I can't believe it took me this long to figure this out. I'm a man in my mid-40s. There's the word tick in ticket. Like there's this sense you want to get it done, move it out of the way, and not worry about it again. But rather than just solving tickets, let's look at the bigger picture. And is there an opportunity here? Are there problems to solve? So numbers. Everyone loves numbers. So the size of the opportunity. So 15% of the world's population experiences some form of disability, and that number is rising. Here's a new one on me, the click-away pound, if you've heard of it. So anyone? The click-away pound. 70.1 billion pounds annually. This is the sort of value that in the UK we would normally express on the side of a bus. This is big money. And these are purchases that people struggle to make. They've put something in their basket, they want to buy a product or service, and they can't complete because of some sort of challenge in using the website or service. Similarly, Americans get a purple dollar. $8 trillion each year is the spending power of disabled people, their families, their networks. And then the fun one is that 98.1% of the top million web pages or home pages have some kind of accessibility issue. So what we're basically saying is, unless you work at the teeniest, tiniest startup, you will have colleagues and co-workers who will have some form of disability and who could probably, do with our help, potentially. And so what if we ignore it? Well, support tickets. But I guess also you might find yourself losing employees. An employee decides that, well, I'm not getting the support I need, and that other company's offering me a fantastic deal, and they've got a bunch of accessible software that I can work with, and they're listening to my feedback. I'm gone. And then all that institutional knowledge walks out the door because you didn't resolve a problem. And then the scary one that's in block capital is actually just the boring, blunt lawsuits. So there's an American Accessibility Act already in place. The European Accessibility Act is coming in 2025. I'm kind of nonplussed that the American one came first, but that's fine. And there's going to be guidelines for critical services that businesses are going to need to apply to. There are also some really interesting cases at this accessi.org. You can read about Target, Netflix, Nike, Domino's Pizza, Beyonce. Beyonce is on the list. There was a lawsuit around accessibility and buying tickets for Beyonce shows. Even Queen Bee. So that's shift one. So how about shift two? About designing for disabilities. So moving away from that, right? So we've all seen this before, many hundreds and hundreds of times, probably as you reset a test device or set up a lab full of iMacs. And yes, I know auto advance is a thing, but anyway. And this is a fairly standard way to sort of categorize common disabilities that people may face. But at the same time, they literally put things in a box. I think when Sarah and her team were doing those user interviews, what they were finding is that these categories would be quite limiting. So it's not just a category, these things exist on a spectrum. So we start with vision. I mean, I am mildly myopic. There are people who are legally blind. But also people may have multiple forms of this at once. So I can't say, I solved the vision problem, that solves things for everyone. Not necessarily. So let's talk to some thought workers now. So we've got some interviews that the team made, and let's see if I can play video properly.
Can you describe any digital challenges that you're facing?
Yes. First, I'd like to be clear that I'm talking about my personal experiences, and I'm not speaking for all autistic people because we are all different. But one of the things that are really difficult for me are pop-ups and cookie banners. They are unpredictable. Normally when you're scrolling down, they come from nowhere and they get out of my control. And when things go out of control for me, I get really anxious and nervous. So this is the number one no for me, because pop-ups are really difficult. We normally have meltdowns whenever there's a change in our plans. So if I'm trying to read something like the website and I'm scrolling down, and sometimes the text has to fit some ads or moving banners. And if the pop-ups come from nowhere, as I said, I get really anxious. And depending on the day, if I'm not very well on that day, I have sometimes to close the web page and leave the computer for a while so I can reorganize myself again and then get back to whatever I was doing.
So, yeah, I mean, I think we've all had days, where you've got a trouble with some customer or a code problem you can't solve and you want to walk away from a laptop. But the idea that just the experience of using a digital product, a website, is enough to lead to that sort of usability meltdown was certainly an eye-opener for me. So similarly, we're going to talk about visual impairment.
Absolutely. So one of the most difficult things when I browse the internet is to understand how to actually use those websites. Because my behavior on using those websites is I always have to zoom in to be able to read the content. And many websites do not consider this use case. Like they have built a website which looks pretty nice and is awesome, but they don't check how it looks like when you zoom in. So maybe I'll just show it you by an example what I mean and where I exactly struggle. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. So here you can see I'm currently in Summit. And that's like the screen size I have to zoom in, or the font size I have to zoom in to be able to read things. So now, if I type my comments here for my regular check-ins, how do I send those? I have absolutely no clue what to do now with my, is it saved already? Or, and yeah, basically I had to like scroll to the side to find out, oh, here are actually buttons that I could use, which, yeah, took me like, I'm not lying, it took me 15 minutes to figure that out because I just wasn't thinking about scrolling to the side.
So again, pretty interesting, right? The idea that putting a button left to right is a pretty arbitrary decision. It looks kind of nice on the right, submit, done. But it creates a real usability problem for somebody who has to use text zoomed in at decent magnification. So I think the idea is about a shift from this idea of designing for disabilities to trying to design products for all. So universal design is a term coined by architect Ronald Mace, and it's about designing, I don't know, buildings, physical spaces, experiences, digital products, so that anyone is able to use them. And this is a really big deal. Because the thing is, I think one of the things that came out of lots of Sarah's interviews were people who said that I don't feel disabled particularly, it's the particular site, service, or tool that I'm using that's disabling me. And the thing is, all of us can be disabled at one point or another. So I mean, if we're lucky, we're all going to get older, right? You know, and then this eyesight isn't getting any better. But also we can be situationally disabled. So have you ever visited a country where you don't speak the language? Broken an arm or a leg, tried to move, get a pushchair or a heavy suitcase across London Underground, step-free. You know, or more pertinently for this conference, you know, if you're from the US, if you tried to cross the street, you know, walking out, looking the wrong way, bang. So all of us can be temporarily situationally disabled. And so building accessible products is about, you know, removing those barriers and empowering your end users. And actually, accessibility can fuel innovation, right? So here are some cool tools. Siri, I feel weird saying Alexa, I expect she's going to do something. And I also Google doesn't get on this, sorry Google. So Siri, Alexa, closed captions. So I for one use, you know, Alexa for timers, controlling my lights. I've been tinkering with a motorbike and I can't touch anything and I can do stuff with Alexa. I mean, since my son's been born, subtitles are welded to the bottom of my TV screen. I think originally, you know, oh, he's sleeping. Well, I'll turn the volume right down. Now it's, I can't hear a damn thing. He's throwing toys around. I have subtitles. So, I mean, this is accessible, but this is usable for all, and it certainly makes my life better pretty much every day. And I couldn't resist, so indulge me.
Now, we've done a lot of talking about Macintosh recently, but today, for the first time ever, I'd like to let Macintosh speak for itself.
Hello, I'm Macintosh. It sure is great to get out of that bag. And accustomed as I am to public speaking, I'd like to share with you an action I thought of the first time I made an IBM mainframe. Never trust a computer you can't read. Obviously I can talk, but right now I'd like to sit back and listen. So it is with considerable pride that I introduce a man who's been like a father to me, Steve Jobs. So,
okay, that's almost 40 years ago. but it feels like a really fantastic example of accessible design, bringing computers. I mean, we wouldn't be in this room if Steve hadn't pulled this one off. It's a Steve thing. But empowering people. Computers involved you memorizing weird commands and learning arcane manuals, and all of a sudden the computer is a tool that could be used by lots more people if you discount the horrendous launch price. So similarly, I guess I should probably talk a little bit about the Mac. So I look after the onboarding protocols where I work. You're all familiar, I guess, with some of the automated assistant pages you can skip. Don't skip them. The thing is, I mean, I get it, you're bored, you've had to do this umpteen times, but unless there's some sort of legal or compliance reason, don't skip these. People may wish to choose the dark mode. They might want to use Siri. They might want to use some of these services. So leave them unticked, please. Similarly, we have a fairly lightweight onboarding process. I snuck out of Luke's session when he was talking about no one getting admin rights, and I felt terrible because I heard him, because everyone gets admin rights. Everyone needs to do what they need to do. My job as a sysadmin is to get the hell out of their way. So we deploy a few tools, we deploy antivirus, we deploy some profiles to secure the device, and we want to get out of there. So it's a lightweight onboarding process anyway. So we use dep-notify, thanks Joel, still works. And because it's built in Swift, it supports assistive technologies like VoiceOver. And for fun, we also actually manage multiple language translations too, which is a nice thing to be able to do. Yeah, you're done. Anyway, so that's more accessible design. And then the next shift. So accessibility, it's only for experts, right? Or maybe not. Maybe you can do something about it today. I mean, but obviously not right now, because you're listening to me, right? But the thing is, there's an awful lot of content out there. So where do you start? So we've got accessibility, good. Content, also good. But what do we do? So again, back to Sarah and team. So back in 2020, so you'll have seen this 98.1% figure before. So back in 2020, the Web Accessibility in Mind did that million homepages, and they discovered that 98.1% had accessibility errors, and that the average was 60.9 accessibility errors, so pages that wouldn't meet the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. Is that easier or worse than saying WCAG? Anyway. Oh, wow, right? 98.1. Accessibility must be like really hard, because I mean, wow, I mean, a homepage, this is your first interaction with your users and your customers. But hang about, what was it? Huh, low contrast text. Missing alt text, empty links. That's not rocket science. Even I can do that. I can fix those. So as an example, here's an example of low contrast text. So color contrast is super important. So hopefully this will show that if we're using the sort of that flamingo pink on a very dark background, it fails the web checker test. If you use a more bold font, huge amounts of difference. And there is a contrast checker you can use to verify that your sites look okay, and that you can also use to help if you're creating content to ensure that that contrast will work for you. And then, see, this is the one I always feel guilty. So I've got a blog that I never update, and I never remember to do my alt text. I'm one of these people, but alt text is really important. A lot of your end users are going to be accessing content with a screen reader. Actually, I learned recently, it's not even about people, it's about bots have feelings too. So, hey ChatGPT, hey Bard. So there's this idea that when your content's being scanned, a web crawler can't read your pictures, but it can read your alt text. So look at this as a comparison. No alt text, empty alt text, Office. Or you've got 3 women seated at a table, working on their laptops and chatting. In the background, white wall, large window, covered in Post-its. Which sounds a little bit like the way I introduced myself at the beginning of the session. I am a human screen reader. It's also important to, if you can, to measure accessibility in your digital products. So Peter Drucker would say, if you don't measure it, it doesn't exist. So measure it, start the conversation. And how? Well, a really easy way to get started, are we going to live demo? Is that if you're using the Chrome browser, Google has a tool built in called Lighthouse. And you can ask Google Lighthouse to do an accessibility check of a page right now. It's part of the developer console. So this is the bit where I break everything and attempt to drop out the slides, and we do a demo. So let's pick. This is probably a good choice, right? Yeah, Macintosh. Let's try and see how well Macintosh have done. for the desktop. So this is kind of in real time. So again, you're not on the Wi-Fi, are you? This will be good. So it's doing a bunch of standard WCAG tests to see how compliant a site is. Look at that. So 93 is a pretty good score, but it's not perfect. But what's quite nice is not only do you get your score, but you also have you've got suggestions of what's failed and how you can fix it. Here we go. Yeah. So remember our friend high-low contrast? In fact, now I look at this again, it's really interesting. It's not only that we're saying that the book tickets could have better contrast. This drags us back to our click-away pound. If I can't find that button to buy your conference tickets, maybe I won't go to your conference. So it'll be interesting to see what MacAduck's website looks like for 2024. Now let's see if I can make this sort of present without breaking everything. No. Ooh, maybe. Anyway, live demo, everyone. But yeah, so I had no idea that Lighthouse existed, and it's pretty cool. So again, the other shift is, instead of improving accessibility, it's about building accessibility in from the beginning. So if you can, include people with a disability in your teams when you're building your product. Not always possible. Or at least as a persona when you're starting that design process. And at the very least in the testing of the products and the digital services you deliver. Here's the thing. So we've just missed it. 18th of May was Global Accessibility Awareness Day. And I noticed that LinkedIn actually sort of promoted my talk on the 18th. So that was a magic synergy, or I just got lucky. But anyway, all good. So ask your team to get involved. We've already said there's an awful lot of low-hanging fruit there, right? Just alt text, contrast stuff. So grab your team, get together, and see if you can fix a few things in your organization. So I had a go at doing this. So my team also looks after Okta. We've just rolled out Okta Identity Engine. It's a lovely product. We've written some documentation, and I ran our own page through Lighthouse, and the score wasn't stellar. We hadn't done alt text. So I fixed it. But what was nice was actually, having looked at Sarah's notes, I then wrote a bunch of really nice descriptive stuff, not a box with some numbers on it. I'm learning. The other thing that was fun, there were actually elements on the page. There were sort of headers and footers and things that, because it was part of our intranet, I couldn't fix them. So I got to prod the intranet team, and a couple of days later I got a ping back saying, hey, yeah, it was a couple of broken links. I fixed them now. So I have inadvertently improved the accessibility of all sorts of pages all across our intranet because I was doing prep for this talk, because it's the right thing to do. So try that in your organizations too. So I guess I haven't been particularly Mac-specific, although, I mean, Steve Jobs unveiling a Mac. If you would like sort of much more hands-on how this applies more directly to Mac and iOS workflows, you have to see Dr. Emily Kautlik's session from Mac Sysadmin 2021. The QR code. Again, I put QR codes on thinking it was helpful, and I read this thing going, never use QR codes, they are horrendous security events. So don't scan the QR code, it's fine. Yeah, her session from Mac Sysadmin 2021 is absolutely superb and fantastic, and you need to go and look at it. Similarly, Apple themselves have some fantastic resources, so apple.com/UK/accessibility. The QR code here will take you to their YouTube playlist of top accessibility tips. They're very iOS-centric, but there are some macOS ones too. And then, look, I've got the shirt, maybe not the right shirt. We put together our own internal playbook that covers an awful lot of the things we've discussed today. It's a download behind the QR code. It's a 30, 40-page PDF. It won't spam you and ask you to sign in to be able to read it. It's worth a read. There's some really nice insights in it. It's a little PDF, definitely worth it. So let's recap before the end. So have we shifted our mindset from accessibility is good for people to also it's good for your organization, getting away from designing for disabilities and looking at designing better products for all, and away from this is just for experts to we can all do things about this day to day right now. So, I mean, huge thanks to a bunch of my fantastic global colleagues all around the world. If you Google these people, you'll hit YouTube, you'll find some interesting presentations and talks. And I know that lots of the content that I've used to create this deck is of a direct result of fantastic stuff that these people have made. So I need to thank all of them for allowing me to look like I know what I'm talking about in front of a room full of people in Brighton. So thanks very much. And then There is space for Q&A, but I also need to drop the shameless plug in as well. A shameless visual gag, which doesn't work if you can't see it. It's a picture of a plug. I mean, I know there was a question in the Hoover app, and I wasn't really sure how to approach it, because I think the Hoover question, he says, squinting, was much more around, I guess, those big picture shifts, like what physical changes have you had to make for a particular workflow. And I don't think that's really what I wanted to talk about. I think the talk is much more around the fact that, you know, the bar to entry is pretty low. There's all sorts of changes that you can make right now. And just having accessibility as part of the conversation when you start to build a product is really, really important. But that's the question. Did James make it up with a mic, or have I finished way too fast? Oh, that's cool. Do you want me to do it? Thank you. Or wait, you can find me, or Matt Muir, or Graham Gilbert, or Neil, or Daz. You know, virtual sessions are welcome. We're happy to have people dial in.
Just a quick question. The example you showed about the autist's case, that pop-ups stressing and impacting. On the Mac environment, for example, you have like software update notifications, you've got these policies start popping up. How would you approach that side of not the websites, not pages?
Yeah, no.
The mechanisms that you have in place in your business to not cause that impact?
No, that's a really interesting and well thought out question, because I know that there were lots of jokes around Apple's pop-ups. You know, it was Vista all over again. You know that, and at the moment I haven't really got an answer for it, because as I said, in terms of the way we do onboarding, we basically get the hell out of the way. So I think at the moment, for example, we're using Sentinel-1 as our anti-malware, and we sort of pre-approve all the pop-ups for Sentinel because I'm using all the pre-approved configs that came from Sentinel. When I used a different vendor, Softworks, that didn't come with any of those configs, I didn't, you know, pre-approve all the pop-ups because I couldn't. It's an interesting thought. As I say, for now, I'm ignoring pop-ups and those notifications because I feel those are kind of Apple's problem. But no, it's a really, really valid point. It's probably worth filing feedback on. I know there are mechanisms for managing them, or maybe I need to actually start doing my job. Thanks. Otherwise, deathly silence. Oh, yeah, there you go. That's cool. We're keeping people exercised. You don't want to sit here too long.
Hello. Maybe this follows on a little bit too similarly from the last question. And I know you don't want to go into things like MDM specifics. You know, it's not low level. However, in terms of what yourselves are doing, how much would you be leveraging existing Apple accessibility in terms of things like, well, there's obviously screen reader. I know there's things like color tinting for displays. Is that something that you allow users to do themselves with the like of system prefs? You get into the things with kind of admin permissions, etc. Like you said, I know this is quite high level, and you're talking more about the thought going into the design. But do you have any kind of thoughts or tips on some of those practicalities as well?
I mean, I think, as I said, we sort of dodged the bullet a bit. So yeah, we're a 30-year company, which means you're not allowed, you have to move out of your parents' basement to be a big grown-up company now. But we're still sort of acting in a kind of start-up model in all sorts of ways. So admin rights for everyone. And in fact, I think we probably couldn't flip to a model where we had, you know, like a Monkey or a Jam self-service tomorrow, because it would break an awful lot of workflows. So with that in mind, I think end users are empowered to do really whatever it is that they need to do to their systems. I think in terms of individual modifications or bits of software, fine. Again, we have a software approvals process. But again, you know, you can request a piece of software, it will go through the approval process. In general, if it's for accessibility, it will be approved. But there's nothing more general than that. Other than, you know, stepping back and letting the end users, really, they're empowered to do whatever they need to do. But it's a really good question. Thanks.
this might be a separate question, it might be a discussion for later, but
Okay.
what sort of documentation do you have internally to help people find the tools they need in terms of accessibility? You know, do you point them in Apple's direction, or do you actually have internal documentation in regards to things like this is how you can find VoiceOver, this is how you can find bits and pieces like that?
No, not really. I think, see also the comments about being an overgrown, wannabe startup. I think things are a lot more ad hoc. And I think, again, the work that the team did towards, with regard to the accessibility talks and making those available and really promoting those, I guess are sort of first steps towards that, really. And again, it's an interesting one because we hand you your Mac and you're an admin and maybe you've never used a Mac before, ever. Regardless of, maybe you've been using a PC and that's your disability, I jest. But for example, so I think we could be better at that in terms of onboarding for all platforms in general. But yeah, for now, that's our jumping off point.
Thank
Cool. No, thanks. Okay. And thanks all for coming and listening to me talk about this stuff. Really appreciate your time.